This is the Crappie Connection, brought to you by Redneck Rubber, Power Crappie, Visit Ridgeland, B&M Poles, K9 Fishing, Cornfield Fishing Gear, Bobby Garland Baits, Genco Fishing, Denali Rods, The Direction TV, Top Hat Jigs, Crappie Magnet, Anderson Minnow Farm,
Hook and Bullet Purpose-Built Optics.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back. Got my bud at the end.
Todd Huckabee.
Where we at, Todd?
We're at the Mid-South Hunting, Fishing, Tackle Show in Grove, Oklahoma, here on beautiful Grand Lake, where this cat fishes quite a bit.
What's your name?
Dustin McDaniel. GFB Outdoors is my guide service.
One of the things that we got, Dustin on here today, we've been wanting to do this show this weekend, and it's on Jig Profile. We want to kind of go through and describe why you select certain baits at different times of the year, and why don't we need so many different styles of baits? Why is everybody making so many different styles of baits? You can kind of go through some of your mindset when it comes to Jig Profile here.
Yeah, mainly, I'm going to be straight honest. When I'm guiding, most of the time people are paying me money to get them on fish, so you can't, the number one bait in the United States nobody can argue is a minnow. So I use a minnow 9 times out of 10 when I'm fishing with clients. Certain times of the year I will change to plastics because plastics are a lot easier to handle than minnows. So when the fish are super aggressive,
Hard to kill these, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And then, hooking them on, every fish, usually I'm changing minnows. It's constantly keeping me working, but jigs will save me a lot of time and trouble if the fish are aggressive. People that don't fish very often have a hard time fishing with jigs. So, but with plastics, as far as fishing tournaments and fishing with clients certain time of the year, usually starting mid to late February through probably the beginning of May, we will throw jigs going off of the fish are so deep within that 30 to 50 foot range. And I'll throw a plastic down there. Seems like whatever you throw, the fish are super aggressive. They're feeding on shad. They're roaming in coves. And I'm throwing usually a big plastic bait. The slab hunter gives a little tail action, so I'm throwing a big, how long are those?
2.5 inches.
2.5 inch slab hunter. These fish are, at Grand Lake, a lot of these fish are 10.5 to 12 inches. And I'm throwing a big bait, and they are just smacking. They'll come 10, 12 foot from that deep water to hit these baits. So when they're fishing like that, I'll throw plastic with clients or not. I mean, you can't really go wrong swimming a big jig down there.
Todd, we talked about profiles, seems like this spring more than ever. Mm-hmm. And, kind of give your spiel on when it comes to these different profiles. And, I've heard you say it so many times here lately.
Well, I think the biggest thing that people get confused about when it comes to profile is they think of size and not necessarily profile. Yep. So, everybody out there knows what I use. I use the Redneck Rubber beaver bottom baits.
Yep.
Okay. So you can take this bait and you can see this tail that has a lot of action.
Big flapper.
Yep. Sometimes that's bad. Sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's too much. It'll actually scare that fish. So, if you come into this tail and you cut it into a V, a lot of people think that it's making the fish think that this is an actual bait because it's got a V-shaped tail. Okay, right. That's not it. What you're doing is you're removing a ton of the fulcrum of this tail. Now all of a sudden that tail's a little more rigid. It's not going to move as much. It's going to stick straight out because you're taking a lot of that plastic away from what is grabbing water. And so, just like the brush pile jig, the little stinger jig there, this bait, even though it's got a lot of action here in my hand, when you stick it in the water, this is pretty rigid bait also,
Yeah.
which is good in a lot of conditions. You know, the Bobby Garland stuff, the top hat, they've all got a place in to me, the profile isn't what a fish is looking at and thinking, ooh, I like the way that's shaped.
Right.
It's the actual action of the bait. Because there's times where a hair jig, a stiff hair jig will get more bites, and it's because that's not moving. You know, we've talked about it, and I don't know what Dustin's seen, but you know, Jerry Hancock and I talked about it. Brian Young and I have talked about it. There's very few people that we will talk about it with, but now that we've let it out, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it, and that is fishing a dead minnow as opposed to a live minnow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it makes a lot of difference sometimes. You drop a minnow down there that's super lively,
For sure.
it'll scare that fish off.
Yeah. I've actually noticed that they'll run from the fish. I don't know if you've seen that before, but I'll put a pretty heavy weight to get that minnow down there, and then when that crappie comes up to it, that minnow actually feels the crappie, sees the crappie, whatever it is, and he will run in circles, and that crappie will chase him around and get tired of chasing the minnow and end up leaving.
Right.
And we've missed so many fish that I say your minnow's way too alive. It's running
Step
in
on it.
circles. Yeah.
Yep.
Or I just grab them and flick them in between the eyes and try to knock them out or kill them, and then drop it down there. You'll catch them 9 times out of 10 a lot better than a live minnow.
And a lot of times also, they'll eat a half a minnow. People are like,
Really?
why do you have so many pairs of scissors in your boat? Because I cut my minnows in half.
Like a butcher shop up there.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to, there again, we keep saying profile, but it's actually the movement that's being created by the profile.
Do you think it's the scent of the minnow? You think so? A hair jig compared to a minnow, if you cut the minnow in half, they're the same size. You drop them both down. When those fish come up to inspect the bait, you think they smell that minnow, or that's a different feeling they get? Because there's definitely a huge difference in the reaction of the fish.
I don't think that my opinion on that is good enough to share with anybody, because
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows. I've heard
You're right.
I've heard amino acids.
Yeah.
I've heard a taste or a flavor or a scent, but then there's a guy in this show right now who just won the world championship last year, Jeff Larch, and if you talk to him, and he's on a different wavelength than the rest of us, and he admits that, he says it's the electrical current
Yeah.
that a living creature has even after even after that creature is dead. If you take a minnow and you kill it, there's still an electrical current there.
Yeah.
You know, on profiles that I've really fine-tuned last year, and I'm a long learner, that's what I've done for years, and I've used one style bait to really do that because of the action for that technique that I need. But this past year, I started really casting to crappie on brush piles, standing timber, and even suspended. And even more now than ever, I change profiles nonstop. Because I'll go to a brush pile, and all of a sudden, I'll make 4 or 5 casts and catch 3 or 4 fish almost instantly.
And then done.
And then they'll slack off, and I'm like, well, I've got to do something different.
Right.
And I'll change up and put different colors on there, but a lot of times, I'm going to change a total different profile out. So now, I honestly believe I need more jigs than I ever did before.
Yeah.
I'm one of these guys, I very rarely use minnows because I'm lazy, I guess. I don't know, because I don't like fooling with them.
Yeah, no, if I'm out scouting and stuff, I'm always throwing plastics in a certain time of year when they're aggressive. But do you find, like summertime is probably what you're talking about when you're doing that.
Right.
Do you find when you cast to those fish on brush or wherever you're catching a school of fish, you catch 4 or 5, will you switch profiles and actually catch more fish?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, I mean, we've got jig packages here and some baits laid up. This is nothing.
Yeah.
It looks like somebody took a tackle box in the front of my
Blew it
boat
up.
and threw them out, because I'm constantly changing.
Right.
I want to go in there and I want to catch as many fish as I can off of one spot.
Right.
As a guide or even a tournament angler, fun fishing or whatever, the less times I move, the less gas I'm burning, the less time I'm wasting, and the less fish you're catching the more times you move. So usually when I get ready to go home at the end of the day, I'm going to have colors everywhere, and it's for one reason. I'm changing profiles and I'm changing even colors, because I want that reaction, you know, and we've talked about it in the past that we might go out to eat together. And I think Todd said this in the beginning. Well, you guys might choose to eat, you know, spaghetti.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I might get lasagna. The table next to us is going to get something totally different as well.
Right.
And that's kind of how I've looked at fishing, especially since live scope, more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, they all want something a little bit different.
Yeah.
So it's just like, you know, you say that who said this. I'll never forget. I was sitting there
was.
and,
You was.
and I was talking about, okay, you can have a concession stand in a show this big, and if all they sell is cheeseburgers, everybody's going to get a cheeseburger, but everybody's going to get it a little bit different.
toppings and
Yeah, I want ranch on mine.
Right.
He may be a mustard guy. He may be a ketchup guy.
ranch on your burger.
Oh yeah.
Come
It's the only
on.
Todd's
way.
different.
Yeah, he'd be
Hey.
weird. He'd be a hard crappie to catch. wouldn't he?
He's very big crappie.
But you know, it's just a little something different. If it's got onions on it, I'm not eating it.
Wow.
You know, but there's weird people like him that might like onions and
Yeah.
not ranch. But so we're all different, even though we're all in the same building. It's the same temperature. It's the
Right.
same pressure, and I think that's how crappie are too.
My theory on that, the same, talking about food and stuff, I think they're in different transition of what they just ate. I think you've got a school of fish that those 4 or 5 fish are the aggressive fish in that they haven't got the morning meal or whatever they just ate, and those other fish are different. So if we just ate a big burger and a huge meal right here, and somebody brings us another burger, we're gonna say, "Oh man, we're stuffed." But if somebody grabs a little Snickers bar,
Yeah.
and they say, "Okay, I can fit that.
Right.
I fit a little snack in there." So that's where I think downsize and all that. When you get your, I'm always thinking the fish is full. So what are you gonna do to give them a little treat, if that makes sense, or their you know, their appetizer or anything
Yeah.
besides the big meal? That's what I try.
And sometimes the complete opposite of that is true.
Yeah.
I guarantee you come to Eufaula and you take that little bait and drop it on our Eufaula fish. Some of them are not going to hit that, or they'll hit a big bait.
Really.
And I think it's the same thing as what you just said, which is 100% correct, but the complete
The other
opposite is
way,
true.
yeah.
Because if I know that I am starving
Right.
and I haven't eaten, and you offer me a little Snickers, I'm like, nah, I'm going to wait because I'm
Till the
getting ready
meal,
to go
yeah.
eat.
Very good point.
And so, and a lot of it has to do with metabolism of the fish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were talking with Josh Johnson about it, the biologist, 2 days ago, and we got talking about how oxygen levels, dissolved oxygen levels, come into play with how a fish wants to feed. And sometimes how fish will starve to death if dissolved oxygen levels are bad.
Really?
Yeah. They just will not eat.
That guy's a trip.
Oh yeah. That's crazy.
I think, you know, profile in one tournament years and years ago was Tony Shepard, and they won the national championship on my home lake in Lake Washington, and it totally blew my mind because, I mean, me and Tony were buddies, been that way for a long time, and I was like, dude, what did you do on my home lake in my backyard? And he said, man, I put on something very tiny.
Oh yeah.
And before then, it wasn't even really anything out there made small. I mean, he was cutting them down, and guys did that always, but on the manufacturing side of things, jig bait companies wasn't doing it at all. And he come in there and totally, you know, whipped my butt, and a lot of other people's as well, though.
Mm-hmm.
But on the profile, and that's one of the, you know, we always say keys into crappie fishing and, you know, different things like that. Even jig size, and Todd hit on it, big baits have their place. Medium baits have their place. And even itty bitty baits have their place now in crappie fishing. And I'm, like I said, I'm guilty as anybody else that I always pretty much used one style body now, or before live scope. That's all I ever used was one style body. And now I really, and Todd and I talked about it before, is there's a place for all these baits.
Right.
And there's even going to be places for baits we haven't seen yet for those particular times and those particular fish that's going to help you catch more fish.
You know, it's just like the beaver bottom bait. We've finally came out with a small version of it. I mean, this is a lot smaller because there was such a demand
Yeah.
from our pro staff and from the public. Hey, we need a smaller one. We need a smaller one. We need a smaller one. Okay, we introduced it at the show 2 days ago. You know what everybody's saying now? Hey, when are you going to make this one bigger? I want
Yeah,
a bigger one. And I'm like,
absolutely.
you've got to be kidding me. We finally come out with a small one, and they're selling like crazy, as you've seen. But now there's a lot of tournament guys that are saying, all right, now I need a bigger one.
And they're
That's
right.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are. I mean, there's a young kid from your neck of the woods that's doing some crazy stuff right now in the tournament world, and
Yeah.
him and I've been talking on the phone, and we got talking about some big stuff, and he's seen it work.
Yeah, he's been in my shop
yeah.
too much.
Uh-huh.
What about color? How you go through their color selection?
Man, colors, honestly, I'm always going something natural. Now that I've kind of figured out, in my opinion, the color's not as important as people think that it might be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going natural until the fish tell me otherwise. And I think that there's a happy medium between too clear and then that perfect tint of color, if that makes sense. Like a monkey milk, all that, that's I love that. But when you go a little too crazy of colors, I just don't have near as much success with them. But I don't fish a whole lot of really muddy water, and I know muddy water a lot of people will use. I mean, that right there is a really good muddy water bait, in my opinion, those brighter and darker baits. But color, in my opinion, isn't as important as the profile presentation. When I say presentation, that's probably what I think is the most important. I think you could throw a huge bait, a little bait, but if you don't present it right,
Oh, yeah.
it could be the best color you've got for them or whatever. You can present a minnow wrong. I think presentation is probably the number one thing.
So like you follow this little bait right here, this little clear bait. For years and years and years, we thought at Eufaula the reason why this didn't work. And, you know, I've known Gary Dollahan forever.
Yeah.
And,
Couldn't see it.
and even he would say, man, we cannot sell our small stuff around Lake Eufaula. And it was because the people there thought there is no way in this muddy water that fish can see this bait.
It's because
So-
he's trained them to catch
they're
on those
all-
redneck rubbers. He's got them trained for those big baits.
Some of this is true. But here's what I see, and it goes back to you talking about clients using live bait. Okay. Now we know without a shadow of a doubt that you cannot have water muddy enough where a fish can't see this if you put it
Right on their nose.
Right there.
Exactly. For
now with a client. This is good for them.
sure. Yeah.
This distance
exactly
is
right.
good.
Exactly.
Okay, now so in muddy water they can't, but they can this. So it's kind of one of those deals of now we see that a natural color like that will work in muddy water. You just have to get it a lot closer to him.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Well, I love all these different, bait companies and all these different styles. And I know for one, my boat's going to keep looking like a
Madhouse.
just a
Yeah.
madhouse. I mean, and I love colors. I've always loved colors when it comes in styles, even more now than I ever have before. And I can't wait to see some of these new baits that are going to come out.
Yeah.
No,
It's no
It
telling.
looks never ending right
Yeah.
now. It looks never ending.
Because we're
Something
thinking that,
new.
years it was just, a baby shad style bait, and that's pretty much, and that dominated because that's what everybody thought. And now we're realizing, well, yeah, there is a time for that, and there's a time for this, and there's a
sure.
time for every one of these baits I know on the table. But also, there's a lot more out there that's going to have their day or their hour, or even like their brush pile, those 15.
yeah, and that's really the great thing about it now, because used to, if you and I were up doing a seminar and we had competing jig sponsors, we would argue back and forth. Well, now I can honestly stand up there and say, you need some of his stuff
Yeah.
and some of
yeah.
this. And so it's great for the whole industry because now we're seeing that you do need it.
Yeah.
And trust me, I use other products. I do. I mean, I've got them in my boat. And like you were talking about, the carnage after
Yeah.
30 days of guiding
Oh my
with
God.
plastic's unreal. That's one of the people say, what's the only thing you don't like about your bass cat? And I say, there's too many cup holders.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because every single one of them's full of
Yeah.
jig skirts.
Oh yeah.
And then I have to clean them out, and they're down way down in there. And,
Get melted in there.
oh yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many jigs you can go through a day, especially if you're getting a little bit tougher and finicky bite. It's throughout the day because, like I said, I very, very rarely use minnows. And I'm not tournament fishing, so that's a whole different animal to me as well.
I don't usually in tournaments, even when it's because I think I'm pretty hard headed with that. I think I can present that jig good enough for minnows. But there's a few times, just like the tournament yesterday, I think I could have had a pound more of weight if I'd have had a minnow. Those big fish, sometimes it don't matter what you got. If you ain't got a live bait, they ain't biting it.
Yeah, a lot of tournaments got one that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, guys, if you got any comments, hey, put in the comments some of your thoughts on jig profiles. What do you think needs to be made?
Yeah, that's one thing I'd really love to see. You know, there's so many people out there now that are making their own plastic baits.
Yeah.
So if you have something that has not been seen by us three, put it in the comment section. Show us a picture of your crazy creation. Yeah.
We'll try.
And as far as hooks wise too, I mean, when you throw in a big hook, tournament scale of things, we're talking guiding in tournament, but tournament scale of things, I have a hard time when I get a bigger hook and a bigger jig, those fish hit it a little bit more aggressive. I don't know if they think they got to hit it a little harder to kill it or what it is, but I have a hard time when I hook one with a big hook. If you get a piece of that gill, that fish is dead.
Oh, yeah.
9 times out of 10 when you have one of those big shanks and you shank them down deep. But if you throw a 24th or a 32nd or something smaller, you usually hook them a little higher up in the mouth. So when I'm tournament fishing, I usually try to go smaller. And a lot of times if a fish is going to eat a big bait, you can get them to eat a smaller bait usually. So I go smaller hooks a lot too. Just my tournament theory of things. Yeah. I've killed a lot of fish by just when they slam it, you got a big hook, and if you get a piece of it, it's usually so aggressive with that braided line now and everything, you're going to hurt that fish.
Hey, I like it.
Yeah.
Next time.
Sounded good, huh?
Yeah, I like it.
Todd Huckabee.
Brad Chappell.
Dustin McDaniel.
Hollow.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away.